Experts enlarged this 1861 photo and realized the enslaved man was staring straight at his master. Dr. Marcus Webb had spent 15 years studying Civil War-era photography, but nothing had prepared him for what he was about to find. On a cold January morning in 2024, he sat in his office at the National Archives in Washington, D.C., carefully digitizing daguerreotypes from a recently donated collection of Southern plantation records. The photograph appeared ordinary at first, a formal portrait from 1861, taken just months before the war began. A wealthy plantation owner named Jonathan Whitfield stood at the center, his wife beside him, their 3 children arranged carefully around them. The family wore their finest clothes, faces frozen in the serious expressions typical of early photography. But it was the figure standing slightly to the left that caught Marcus's attention. An enslaved man, perhaps in his 30s, stood at the edge of the frame. His clothes were simple, his posture straight. Standard for these photographs, enslaved people were often included as displays of wealth and property. Marcus had seen hundreds of similar images. What made him pause this time was something subtle, something he couldn't quite name. He leaned closer to his monitor, adjusting the contrast and brightness. The photograph had been taken with remarkable clarity for 1861, likely by one of Charleston's premier photographers. He zoomed in on the enslaved man's face, and then he saw it. The man wasn't looking at the camera. His eyes were turned slightly to the right, fixed with unmistakable intensity on Jonathan Whitfield himself. It wasn't a glance. It wasn't accidental. It was a stare, direct, unflinching, deliberate. Marcus sat back in his chair, his heart racing. In an era when enslaved people were brutally punished for even making eye contact with white people, this man had been photographed staring directly at his master, and someone had allowed it to be captured forever. "What happened to you?" Marcus whispered to the image on his screen. He knew that stare. It wasn't defiance. It wasn't fear. It was something far more powerful. It was testimony. Marcus immediately began cross-referencing the photograph with the collection's documentation. The daguerreotype had been donated by the great-great-granddaughter of the Whitfield family, along with dozens of letters, ledgers, and personal papers. The family had owned a mid-sized cotton plantation called Oakmont, located about 40 miles inland from Charleston, South Carolina. The back of the photograph's frame had a notation in faded ink: "Family Portrait, April 1861. Photographer, Henry Morrison, Charleston." Marcus pulled up Morrison's business records, preserved in the South Carolina Historical Society archives. Morrison had been one of Charleston's most sought-after photographers in the years before the war, catering exclusively to wealthy families. His work was expensive and meticulous. Next, Marcus turned to the Whitfield plantation records themselves. These documents were a historian's goldmine, ledgers tracking every purchase, sale, and expense from 1840 to 1865. He found the photography session listed: portrait sitting, Morrison Studio, 45-0, April 12, 1861. But it was another entry, just 3 days earlier, that made Marcus's breath catch. April 9, 1861. Sold, Negro girl, age 14, to broker Samuel Patterson, 800 Durn, immediate transfer to Richmond Market. His hands trembled as he continued reading. The ledger listed names of enslaved people, tracking their ages, skills, and family relationships. There, recorded in cold, businesslike handwriting: Samuel, age 32, field worker; wife, Ruth; children, Eliza, sold 4961; Thomas, age 8, a daughter. Sold 3 days before that photograph. Marcus zoomed back into the image, looking again at Samuel's face. Now the intensity of that stare took on new meaning. What had happened in those 3 days? Why had the daughter been sold so suddenly? And why would Samuel have been included in a formal family portrait immediately afterward? Marcus opened a new research file on his computer and titled it Samuel, Oakmont Plantation, 1861. He had a feeling this was going to be a long investigation. Over the following weeks, Marcus immersed himself in every document related to the Whitfield family. He started with Jonathan Whitfield's personal correspondence, carefully preserved in acid-free folders. The letters revealed a man who saw himself as a benevolent master, frequently writing to relatives about his fair treatment of his enslaved workers. But the contrast between his words and the plantation records told a different story. Between 1855 and 1861, Whitfield had separated at least 12 families by selling children or spouses to distant buyers. The sales were always described in business terms: necessary for operational costs, excellent market timing, or behavioral correction. Marcus found references to Samuel in several documents. An 1858 inventory described him as reliable, strong, literate despite prohibition, potential troublemaker if not managed. That notation about literacy intrigued Marcus. Teaching enslaved people to read was illegal throughout the South, punishable by severe beatings or worse. In a letter dated January 1861, Whitfield wrote to his brother, "Samuel continues to be my most productive worker, though his intelligence makes him dangerous. He watches everything, understands too much. I've considered selling him, but he's too valuable in the fields." Marcus then turned to county court records, searching for any legal proceedings involving the Whitfield plantation. Most were routine: debt settlements, property transfers, tax disputes. But one entry from April 1861 caught his eye: a complaint filed by a neighboring plantation owner about disturbances at Oakmont on April 8th. The document was frustratingly vague, mentioning only that order was restored and appropriate measures were taken. But the date, April 8th, just one day before Eliza was sold, couldn't be coincidental. Marcus needed more information. He expanded his search to newspaper archives from Charleston and surrounding areas. Southern newspapers from this era often contained advertisements for runaway enslaved people, notices of sales, and occasionally reports of incidents on plantations that required intervention. After hours of searching through digitized microfilm, he found it. The Charleston Mercury, April 10, 1861, page 7. A small article, barely 3 inches of text, buried among advertisements and shipping notices. Disturbance at Oakmont Plantation. On the evening of April 7th, a regrettable incident occurred at the Oakmont estate of Mr. Jonathan Whitfield. A house servant was removed from the premises following inappropriate behavior. Order was swiftly restored through the firm but measured response of Mr. Whitfield, who is well regarded for his capable management. The matter has been resolved to the satisfaction of all parties. No further action is required. The language was typical of the era: euphemistic, protective of white reputation, deliberately vague about what actually happened. But Marcus now had a date: April 7th, 2 days before Eliza was sold, 3 days before the photograph. He cross-referenced this with the plantation ledgers again. On April 7th, there was an unusual expense entry: Dr. Thornton, emergency house call, $15.00. Medical visits to plantations were expensive and rare, typically called only for white family members or for enslaved people whose death would represent significant financial loss. Marcus tracked down medical records from Dr. James Thornton, whose practice records had been donated to the Medical University of South Carolina archives. He submitted a research request and waited anxiously for 2 weeks before receiving scanned copies of Thornton's appointment books and patient notes. The entry for April 7, 1861, was brief but telling. Called to Whitfield Plantation, treated Negro male, extensive injuries from correction, multiple contusions, possible broken ribs, patient survived, no permanent disability expected, fee $15. Samuel had been severely beaten. Marcus sat with this knowledge, feeling the weight of it. The clinical language couldn't hide the reality. A man had been brutally injured, treated just enough to preserve his value as property, then forced to stand for a formal photograph 3 days later beside the man who had ordered his beating. But why? What had Samuel done to provoke such violence? And what did it have to do with his daughter's sudden sale? Marcus's breakthrough came from an unexpected source. While researching the Freedmen's Bureau records, the federal agency established after the Civil War to assist formerly enslaved people, he discovered a series of letters written in 1866 by a woman named Ruth to various bureau offices across Virginia and North Carolina. The letters were searching for family members separated during slavery. Ruth, formerly of Oakmont Plantation, South Carolina, was looking for her daughter Eliza and her son Thomas. Each letter contained the same desperate request, the same carefully preserved details. My daughter Eliza was sold in April 1861, age 14, through Richmond Market. My son Thomas disappeared in 1863, age 10. My husband Samuel died in 1864. Please help me find my children. Marcus felt a chill run through him. This was Samuel's wife, Samuel's family. He immediately requested Ruth's complete Freedmen's Bureau file, which included a longer testimony she had given to a bureau agent in Charleston in 1867. The testimony was 7 pages long, handwritten by the agent as Ruth spoke. Her words, translated from her voice to bureaucratic record, still carried enormous power. My name is Ruth. I was enslaved at Oakmont from birth until freedom came. My husband was Samuel. He was a good man, gentle and smart. He taught himself to read from newspapers Master left lying around. He taught our daughter Eliza too, in secret, late at night in our cabin. In early April 1861, Master's oldest son William came to our cabin when Samuel was working late in the fields. William tried to force himself on Eliza. She was only 14. She screamed. I tried to pull William away, but he struck me down. Samuel came running when he heard the screaming. He saw William on top of our daughter. Samuel pulled him off her and pushed William outside. He didn't strike him, just pushed him away from Eliza. But Samuel had put his hands on a white man. We knew what that meant. Marcus had to stop reading. He stood up, walked to his office window, and looked out at the Washington streets below. The weight of what he was reading demanded a moment of respect. Marcus returned to Ruth's testimony, bracing himself for what came next. William ran to the main house. Within an hour, Master Whitfield came with the overseer and 3 other white men from neighboring plantations. They dragged Samuel out of our cabin. They tied his hands and took him to the whipping post near the barn, the same post where they punished people for small infractions. They made all of us watch. Every enslaved person on Oakmont, about 40 people, was forced to stand in a circle while they beat Samuel, not with the regular whip. Master Whitfield used a paddle made of thick wood with holes drilled in it. I later learned those holes were meant to tear the skin worse. They beat him until he couldn't stand. The doctor came the next day and treated him enough to make sure he wouldn't die. Master said Samuel was too valuable to lose. But the message was clear. Anyone who defied a white man, for any reason, would face the same. The worst part came 2 days later. Master called me and Samuel to the house. He told us that Eliza was being sold immediately. He'd already contacted a broker in Richmond. She would be sent away that very afternoon. Samuel begged. I'd never seen my husband beg for anything in his life, but he got on his knees and pleaded for Master to keep our daughter close, to sell her locally if she had to be sold. Master Whitfield just smiled. He said the Richmond market would bring a better price for a pretty young girl, and that Samuel needed to learn that there were consequences for forgetting his place. They took Eliza away in a wagon while we watched. She was crying, reaching back for us. That was the last time we ever saw our daughter. Samuel never recovered from it, not in his body. His ribs healed eventually, but something broke inside him that day. Marcus read the passage 3 times. Now he understood the photograph completely. That stare wasn't defiance. It wasn't even anger. It was something more profound. A father's grief captured and preserved. A silent accusation that had survived more than 160 years. But Ruth's testimony continued, and the next part explained why the photograph had been taken at all. 3 days after they took Eliza, Master Whitfield announced that a photographer from Charleston was coming to take a family portrait. This was unusual. Those photographs were expensive, and Master was always complaining about money. But he'd just received $800 for selling Eliza, and I think he wanted to celebrate his wealth and power. What happened next was cruel beyond words. Master Whitfield ordered Samuel to be in the photograph, not in the back with the other house servants, but standing right there beside the family, close enough to be clearly seen. Samuel could barely walk, his ribs were still healing, and every breath hurt him, but Master insisted. I asked the overseer why Master wanted Samuel in the picture. He laughed and said, "Mr. Whitfield wants a record of how things are properly managed here. He wants everyone who sees this picture to know that even troublemakers learn their place eventually." Samuel understood what was happening. This wasn't just a photograph, it was a demonstration. Master Whitfield wanted to document Samuel's submission, to create permanent proof that even a man who dared to protect his daughter could be broken and forced to stand obediently beside the very people who'd destroyed his family. I helped Samuel dress that morning. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from rage he couldn't express. He said to me, "Ruth, if I have to stand there, I'm not going to lower my eyes. Let him make me stand beside him, but I won't give him my eyes. I want him to know, and I want God to know, that I don't bow inside. They can take Eliza, they can break my body, but they can't make me forget who I am." When the photographer arranged everyone, Master Whitfield stood proud in the center, his family around him. Samuel stood to the side. I was watching from the house window. The The photographer called for everyone to be still, to look at the camera, but Samuel didn't. He turned his head slightly and stared directly at Master Whitfield. I saw Master notice it. For a moment I thought he would stop the photograph and punish Samuel again, but he didn't. I think Master believed that having Samuel in the picture at all, beaten, with his daughter sold away, forced to pose with the family, was victory enough. He didn't realize that Samuel's stare would survive him, that people more than a century later would see that look and understand exactly what it meant. Marcus sat back from his computer, overwhelmed. The photograph wasn't just historical documentation. It was an act of resistance. In the only way available to him, Samuel had refused complete submission. He'd left evidence, testimony. Marcus continued through Ruth Friedman's bureau testimony, learning what happened to Samuel after that photograph was taken. After that day, Samuel changed. He worked in the fields, followed orders, didn't cause any visible trouble, but something in him had hardened. He stopped talking much, even to me and Thomas. He would stare at the horizon for hours after work, saying nothing. When the war started, just days after that photograph, everything at Oakmont became harder. Master Whitfield left to join the Confederate Army in 1862, leaving his wife and overseer to manage the plantation. Food became scarce. We worked longer hours. Several people tried to escape to Union lines, but they were caught and punished severely. Samuel never tried to run. I asked him once why he didn't attempt it, especially after Thomas disappeared in 1863. We still don't know if he ran away, was sold, or died. Samuel said, "If I run and get caught, they'll kill me, and then you'll have no one. I'm staying alive because you need me, and because someday, somehow, I'm going to find Eliza again." In 1864, when Sherman's army started getting close to South Carolina, the overseer became paranoid about rebellion. He accused Samuel of organizing the other enslaved men, though there was no evidence. The overseer had Samuel locked in the plantation jail for 3 days without food. The jail was just a small wooden shed, hot as an oven in the summer sun. Samuel survived those 3 days, but he developed a terrible fever afterward. We had no medicine. No doctor would come anymore because of the war. I tried everything, cool water, what herbs I could find, but the fever wouldn't break. Samuel died on August 14, 1864. He was only 35 years old. His last words to me were, "Find Eliza. Tell her I never stopped fighting for her. Tell her that photograph, if it still exists, shows the truth about who broke who." I've been searching for 3 years now. I've written to every Freedmen's Bureau office between here and Richmond. No one has seen my daughter. I don't know if she's alive. I don't know where Thomas went. I'm alone, but I'll keep searching until I find them, or until I die trying. Marcus had to take a break. He walked out of his office, got coffee he didn't drink, and sat in the hallway for 20 minutes. He'd researched countless stories of slavery's horrors, but this one felt different. Samuel's face was right there on his computer screen. This wasn't abstract history. This was a real man who'd suffered unimaginable loss and still found a way to resist. Marcus couldn't let Samuel's story end with Ruth's desperate, unanswered letters. He decided to trace what happened to Eliza after she was sold in April 1861. It would be difficult. Enslaved people sold through Richmond's markets were often resold multiple times, their paper trails fragmentary at best. He started with Richmond auction house records. The Patterson brokerage firm had been one of the largest in Virginia, and their records had survived in the Virginia Historical Society archives. He found the entry, April 12, 1861, female age 14 from South Carolina, sold to James Mitchell, Petersburg, Virginia, 8/25. James Mitchell's estate record showed he'd owned a small tobacco plantation near Petersburg. Mitchell had died in 1863, and his property, including 12 enslaved people, had been sold at auction to settle his debts. Marcus traced the next sale. Eliza had been purchased by a family named Henderson, who owned a household in Richmond itself. This was significant. Urban enslaved people often had slightly better conditions than those on rural plantations, and they had more opportunities for literacy and eventual freedom. The Henderson family papers were scattered across several archives, but Marcus eventually found household account books that mentioned Eliza, house servant, age 16, in 1863. She had survived. She was alive at least that long. Then came the most remarkable discovery. In the records of Richmond's first African Baptist church, established by and for freed black people after the war, Marcus found a marriage record from December 1865. Eliza, formerly enslaved, approximately age 19, married to James Freeman, Union Army veteran, 23rd U.S. Colored Infantry. She'd made it to freedom. She'd survived the war, and she'd married a man who'd fought for the Union. Marcus searched through Freedmen's Bureau records for James and Eliza Freeman. He found them in the 1870 census, living in Washington, D.C. James worked as a carpenter. Eliza was listed as literate, likely thanks to her father teaching her in secret all those years before. They had 2 children, Samuel, age 3, and Ruth, age 1, named after her parents. Marcus's next search was almost frantic. Did Eliza and Ruth ever reconnect? He found his answer in a letter tucked into a different section of Ruth's Freedmen's Bureau file, dated November 1870, a brief note from a bureau agent in Charleston stating that Ruth had been successfully reunited with her daughter Eliza in Washington and that the case file could be closed. They'd found each other. After 9 years of separation, after Samuel's death, after everything, Ruth and Eliza had been reunited. Marcus felt tears running down his face as he read the notation. It was such a small victory against the enormity of slavery's cruelties, but it was real. 3 months after beginning his research, Marcus prepared to present his findings. He'd been invited to speak at a symposium on Civil War photography, and he'd chosen Samuel's photograph as his subject. The image that had seemed ordinary at first glance now represented something far more powerful. On the evening of his presentation, Marcus stood before a screen displaying Samuel's face, enlarged so every detail was visible. The audience, historians, archivists, descendants of formerly enslaved people, and students, sat in silence as he told Samuel's story. He explained what had happened on April 7, 1861. He shared Ruth's testimony. He traced Eliza's journey to freedom and her eventual reunion with her mother. This photograph, Marcus said, gesturing to the image, was meant to be a document of power. Jonathan Whitfield intended it to show his wealth, his family's status, and his complete control over the people he enslaved. He believed that including Samuel in the frame, beaten, his daughter sold away, forced to stand beside his oppressors, would prove that even resistance could be crushed. But Whitfield made a mistake. He underestimated Samuel. That stare, that refusal to look away, that determination to leave evidence of his humanity, it survived. For 163 years, this photograph existed in storage, in family collections, unseen and unremarked. But Samuel's testimony was always there, waiting to be recognized. When we enlarge this image with modern technology, we're not just seeing better detail. We're fulfilling Samuel's purpose. He knew he couldn't speak his truth aloud. He couldn't write it down. He couldn't prevent his daughter from being sold or save himself from being beaten. But he could leave one thing, a look that said, "I see what you are, I know what you've done, and I refuse to pretend otherwise." That stare is not submission. It's documentation. It's resistance. It's testimony that outlived everyone in this photograph, the oppressors and the oppressed. And now, finally, his story can be told fully. The audience was silent for a long moment. Then someone in the back began to clap, and the applause spread through the room. Several people were crying. After the presentation, a woman in her 70s approached Marcus. She introduced herself as Dr. Patricia Freeman, a retired professor from Howard University. "James and Eliza Freeman were my great-great-grandparents," she said quietly. "I grew up hearing stories about Eliza's father, Samuel, who she said was the bravest man she'd ever known. She told her children that her father had found a way to fight back that nobody could erase. I never knew what she meant until tonight." She showed Marcus a small photograph she carried in her wallet, a portrait of Eliza taken in the 1890s, when she was in her 50s. Eliza sat confidently in a Victorian dress, her children and grandchildren around her. Her expression was calm, dignified, proud. Eliza lived to be 84 years old, Patricia said. She learned to read and write. She taught school for freed children after the war. She raised 6 children who all became educated professionals, and she never stopped telling them that they came from people who refused to be broken. Now I know she was telling the truth. Thank you for finding him. Thank you for telling his story. Marcus looked again at Samuel's enlarged face on the screen. That stare, once meant to demonstrate defeat, had become exactly what Samuel intended, an eternal witness. A father's love and grief, captured in silver and glass, outlasting slavery itself. The photograph had finally told its truth.